Hi, everybody. This is SAAD. Returned last night from a trip to Southern California where I attended the Society for Consumer Psychology conference that was held in Huntington Beach, which is very close to my home territory. As some of you know, I lived in Newport Beach for a while when I was a professor at UC Irvine, and I've had family there in the area since 1984, so it was nice to go back home, so to speak. In any case, what I want to talk to you today is a few of the talks that I attended that caught my attention that I thought might be worthwhile discussing. The first, I attended a few plenary addresses. John Krosnick, who is a professor of political science, communication, and also of psychology at Stanford University, he's the one I'm going to focus today on his lecture, which I thought was fantastic. Also, Carl Marcy, who is a psychiatrist, who was talking about addiction by consumers with technology. And it's any of you who have children know about the struggles to try to get them to pry the iPad away from their hands. And I also listened to a lecture by Craig Fox, who is a professor of management and psychology at UCLA. What I loved about these plenaries, or at least the ones that I've attended, is that they truly were interdisciplinary. We often in consumer psychology talk about being interdisciplinarians, and yet oftentimes, as happens in so many disciplines, people then become very territorially defensive of their discipline, and so they wish to be interdisciplinary, but then the metrics don't necessarily is not congruent with that. In this case, you had a professor who specializes in political psychology, another one Craig Fox, who is both a professor of management and psychology, who was also talking about political psychology, and then you had a psychiatrist. So this is wonderful, and I certainly wish to send out a kudos to the organizers of the conference for expanding the interdisciplinary boundaries of consumer behavior in general and consumer psychology in particular. That's something that I've fought for many years. Let me focus on a few points that came out of the talks. So John Krosnick, by the way, I just went and checked out his Google Scholar Citation Index. God damn, that's impressive. Well done, John. I loved his talk for a few reasons. I'm going to get into the substance in a second, but first I wanted to talk about a cosmetic issue. What was amazing about his talk is that he delivered it at exactly the right level, meaning that oftentimes presenters get caught in the proverbial weeds where they start sharing with you their statistical details and how they control for this and that. And of course, nobody is contesting the importance of methodological and analytical rigor, but when you're giving a plenary, certainly you want to direct the substance at a higher level. You want to be talking at the level of the whole forest, and he was truly wonderful in doing that. The main point of his talk is that order matters. Now, let me give you a bit of a background to what I mean by that. Suppose I were to tell you I'm going to ask you to evaluate this prospective employee. I'm going to give you three positive attributes of the employee and three negative ones. So I can deliver that sequence of qualities and flaws in a multitude of ways. I can give you positive, 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 negative, 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 or negative, 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 positive, 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 or I can interchange them: positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Well, order of information from a classical economic perspective shouldn't matter, but of course we know that economists are often very wrong, certainly classical economists, and so order does matter. A gentleman who made his career demonstrating this is Norman Anderson, who was a professor of psychology at University of California, San Diego, who developed the field of information integration. How do we integrate information in light of these orders? And this was something that I was actually quite interested in studying in my doctoral work. Now, in John's case, what he's doing is he's looking at order effects specifically in a very specific political context. The order in which candidates are shown in the ballot, does that affect does that have any impact, statistical impact, on the likelihood of them being chosen? So, for example, if you put Trump as the first person on a ballot and then Hillary Clinton, the mere fact that Trump is first, could that make people, one might argue irrationally, choose him with greater likelihood simply because of the order in which he is presented? So he shared some truly compelling and fascinating data demonstrating that the order in which the candidates are listed across many different elections does matter. And so this shows you again how humans in general and consumers in particular are hardly rational in the way that economists think we ought to be, right? The reality is that the order in which the candidates are presented should not matter. But guess what? It does matter. Now, sometimes not to a great degree, but in other cases, as he showed, it matters in sufficient degree that people should be concerned by it. Now, perhaps one thing that I didn't appreciate, not because I'm a Trump supporter, remember I'm Canadian, I don't have a dog in the fight, but it was kind of the standard, we're all here hating on Trump. We all know that Trump is, there's there's always this hidden, if not so hidden, subtext that, had order not been important, we wouldn't have this dreadful guy and we would have the savior, Hillary Clinton. There's always this kind of undercurrent throughout many of these talks, in the sense that everyone presumes that everyone who has a brain, and certainly academics, should all hate Trump and should all love Hillary and Barack Obama and so on. And I think that's unfortunate. Present the data and don't make any presumptions as to people's political affiliations. On a more minor note, I also wanted to briefly mention one or two comments about Karl Marcy's plenary. He's the psychiatrist, as I said, who's done some interesting work looking at how consumers are addicted to their technology. In presenting his case, he talked about porn addiction, the fact that many men, of course, with the online medium now suffer from an excessive viewing of pornography. And he shared some data about erectile dysfunction that is happening in young men and in middle-aged men, cases where you wouldn't expect this condition to arise, forgive the pun. And he showed that in cases where there's very heavy pornographic viewing use, it took, I think, if I remember the details, I can't remember if it was 1 to 2 months or 4 to 6 months for the middle-aged men to resume their regular, sexual function after being weaned off the porn, whereas it took 1 to 2 years for the young men to be able to do so. So I'm not very sure about the veracity of the data. He didn't give any methodological details of the data in question, but I just thought that was a interesting snippet. So there you have it. Enjoyed the conference. It was a bit subdued in that many people did not attend because of the coronavirus, reality that the world is facing. But nonetheless, it was fun to attend talks, speak to some colleagues, and of course, get a bit of a tan. Hope you're all having a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Cheers.